Great. Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Sherborn Board of Selectmen meeting of February 6, 2014. As we always do, David, Town Administrator, will read our agenda here.
All right, we'll start off with public comment, and then review of capital items with the Regional School Committee and Pine Hill School Committee, and then talk to Jane Push from the Energy Committee about the Solarized Sherborn update, and then talk to Tax Collector Nancy Hess about a proposed warrant article for the town meeting, and then Town Administrator report, Selectmen reports, and then break into an executive session.
Great. Any amendments to the agenda, gentlemen? No? I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as read.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Great. Off we go to the races. Public comment, please. Yes. Please come on up. Identify yourself.
I'm Jim Campbell, 212 Farm Road. I'm here tonight to ask you to consider a regionalization study for the fire department. You may have something in the works, but I think it's a topic that needs expedition and needs to be moved forward, and I have a couple reasons for that. First is that I think this fire truck we're considering for this year's town warrant is an expensive piece of equipment, and I've been told it's expensive because it has to be customized to meet a number of requirements unique to Sherborn. And that may be the case, but it also may be the case that were we to really collaborate on a serious basis with another town, as opposed to mutual aid, we might find that some of these requirements could be diminished in some way. That, for example, if we had confidence that a ladder truck would be soon behind our first responders, we might not need as big a ladder on the truck or something, that kind of thing, or the number of minutes we're going to have to wait before more water would back up from be available from another town. So I think that that's one reason. The second reason is I believe that the MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, is already funding regionalization, or call it collaboration, studies in the Boston area. The one we all know about or have heard about is the merger of the Ashland and Hopkinton fire departments. But in addition, they're funding an effort by the fire chiefs in Essex County, Massachusetts, to look at town clusters and some kind of a official collaboration or regionalization there, which sounds like more than just mutual aid. We've learned that the point person for this at MAPC is a Peter Dunn. He's actually the manager of the Ashland-Hopkinton merger study. And so my specific request to you is that you would consider having our town administrator contact him and see how they could support any kind of a regionalization effort for Sherborn Fire.
So, Jim, could you just put what you've suggested in a brief email to David?
Sure.
And that will help spur that on. We can consider putting that on an agenda item and further discussion. Thank you. Anybody else, public comment? Yes, Mr. Delaney. Well, we got
I will avail myself of the microphone.
Excellent.
This is a related subject. The fire department, fire truck. And Jim alluded to it when he talked about having a custom-built truck that could navigate a lot of or at least many driveways in Sherborn that don't lend themselves to big, wide trucks coming in. My suggestion would be that the fire chief or his appointee might delegate or do himself and go around, investigate these driveways, and if it's too narrow, too long, or a combination of both, why not just make a note, send a letter to the homeowner, and say, your driveway is far too difficult for us to navigate with our present equipment. So if you're comfortable and not having our best fire equipment navigate your driveway in case of a fire, so be it. If you're not, widen the driveway. And I think that would certainly have, if that were acceptable, the homeowners might consider that their insurance premiums might go up if somebody heard that they had a driveway that was too narrow for fire trucks. Or they may find, like we did years ago when I was a member of this august group, that...
You've been a hard act to follow, Bob.
But that when we got the dry hydrant program through, thanks to the hard work of our volunteers, many of whom don't live in town anymore or otherwise not here, we got a lower insurance rating. And if somebody was at risk of having their insurance premiums go up, they might say, hey, I'm going to widen the driveway, or I'm going to make it more navigable for these trucks. And rather than, that would reduce the need, or at least one of the needs, for this very expensive vehicle. And there's a lot of people in town who don't have that problem. And they might, at town meetings, stand up and say, you know, I'm not comfortable voting for 900 and some odd thousand truck because somebody else has a long, narrow driveway that can't be navigated. And I'd rather see them widen their driveway, and I'm going to vote against it. And that's an issue that, you know, it's unknown. You can't, I mean, maybe that won't make any difference to people. But I think it would be a very worthwhile effort on the part of the chief to, I mean, even if it just meant he knew which driveways were going to be hard. At this point, I suspect not everybody knows which driveways are the tough ones. They know there are some out there, maybe a lot, but I think they'd be comfortable knowing that.
Great.
And that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Bob. Maybe Jim can incorporate some of your talking points in what he sends to David, if that's possible. That would be great. Yes, Elliot?
I was wondering if he knows how many driveways this might involve.
No idea.
You don't have, okay.
But it's probably more than we assume.
Okay.
Great. Any other public comment? Great, well, that moves us along, and we're back up to speed here. So I think we have the Regional School Committee capital items to discuss. How are you? We even have the superintendent with us.
We try and bring them out as often as possible.
So how about introducing yourselves for the audience here as well as in front of the TV?
Well, you might.
Michael Lee, representative on the school committee for Sherborn.
Dana White, I'm actually a Dover representative, but here in part because Michael's losing his voice.
Aha, great.
Steve Bliss, I'm the superintendent of schools, and if I may, we also have our regional school committee chair in the audience as well,
Richard.
Mr. Richard Robinson.
Terrific. Great.
Wonderful. Yeah, I believe you have a copy.
We have more chairs if he wants to join you.
Want to join us, Richard?
You're welcome to. It's not a comfy chair, but,
asked me a question, I
and the superintendent's not a comfy. I'm having fun to get
He's on the small
Mr.
chair.
He's in semi-retirement ever since the...
All right, we got, is it the
Yes,
same package we got
that's
earlier, so there's copies for
There's some
everybody?
more.
Great,
Fantastic.
These are black and white.
great, and we can, do you have this on your website? I
We
wonder.
will tomorrow morning.
Okay, so folks that might be interested that want to get a good look at it, that'd be terrific.
Absolutely. So, sitting in front of you, Michael and I comprise the capital subcommittee of the Regional School Committee. So we're here to present some of the work that we've been doing over the past few years and update you on where we stand for fiscal 15. So just to give a little background to make sure everyone's on the same page, in 2003, the two towns undertook a $40 million regional campus project, which, in case you weren't in town or you don't remember, renovated the high school extensively, as well as the athletic fields, built a brand-new middle school, upgraded the shared facilities, which was the wastewater treatment facility and the auditorium, through a wonderful partnership with the Mudge Foundation, and notably included pretty minimal work to Lindquist as well as the two gyms, the high school and the middle school gym. What ensued then was, I think, a very nice decade of what we call our honeymoon period, where the buildings were in great shape, minimal investment and maintenance required from our budget and from the towns. As we started into 2014 and now into 15 and beyond, it's really our fiduciary duty to upkeep those buildings. We've been entrusted with them by the two towns, and we want to make sure that we develop a mutual understanding for addressing the items that have reached their end of useful life, as well as anything else that comes up, knowing that we can't defer things indefinitely. Just like when you have a house, there's some things you can shift by a year or two, but in the end, you need to invest in your property or it comes back to you down the road. There were some things that weren't attended to in the 2003 renovation, notably the air conditioning project that both towns were wonderful to support this past year. There are opportunities potentially to leverage new technologies. That was where we put in the new turf field with the boosters' help last year, and then as well as lighting opportunities that we'll talk about. And then most importantly, that we budget everything accordingly and appropriately so that nothing comes as a surprise to either town if possible. So as part of that, we really tried to change from what I think has been happening in the past, which was really a one-year window, to a 5 and even a 10-year look at the assets. So that for each year, we defined what capital projects should be done and come up with that list, and then separately figure out how do you pay for those capital projects. So try and decouple what they should be from how we should pay for them. And then engage both towns, the stakeholders in both towns, as to what should be paid in that fiscal year, and then finalize through the RSC what we want to go to town meeting in terms of requests to both towns. So that's the process. So step one was really to define what we thought we should ask for in 2015. So the first thing was to bring the band back together that we had in 2014, which was Superintendent Bliss, Michael and I from the Regional School Committee, Chris Tague, our business manager, and Ralph Kelly as the facilities director of the region. He certainly knows the building inside and out, and obviously is the most logical person to opine on the status of different projects. Michael was wonderful to take the entire on-site inside project that was done for the region by an external consultant and put all of that into a database, a sortable, movable, changeable database where we could then use that data and shift it by years and come up with, run different scenarios pretty quickly. So that's been a fantastic tool for us to use in conjunction with Mr. Kelly.
Is that on the website by any chance?
Yes.
Okay,
That
good.
is. That is,
Yes.
the database
Yeah,
is
not
not.
the database, but the...
But anyone who wants to
report.
learn about it, I'm sure Michael will sit
I'm
down
sure.
with any of you and walk you through it. And then we also wanted to look at the 2014 projects and make sure that the projects had come in as expected. And indeed, the middle school air conditioner, I'm sure as you've heard, came in very close, really on budget, which was amazing. Amazingly managed, both by our staff as well as the contractor. And then the other $122,000 of projects that were approved last year are underway. They're either been completed or on task for completion as soon as the students leave the buildings in June. We took the project report, and what Michael's done is he's basically, for each project in there, of which there are, how many of them in there now?
600.
600 projects in there, spanning 20 years, and put in basically an as early as date and as late as date. So in other words, on any given project, I'm sure as you would find in your own house, there's as soon as you could do something and as late as you'd want to do something, and that window can shift. And so by assigning each project one of those dates, we could then look at how things sum up in any given year. There were, at the start of this year, about 88, or there were, how many projects on the parking list? We had several hundred, $600,000 of projects in our parking lot, which required more investigation. And we also wanted to look at multi-year projects and see where we could roll them together, whether they were flooring projects or painting projects, where there might be economies of scale or way to leverage projects being done either because of bid or because of execution on a project. So we tried to link as many multi-year projects together. And then also we wanted to make sure that not only were we looking at fiscal 15 to 19, but also for that next 5 years, the 20 to 25. so that we, again, nothing was really going to come as a surprise, hopefully, to the two towns. There were a few small projects that were added that weren't in the report, $9,000 concrete slab in front of one of the doors, little things like that that we wanted to make sure was captured. We did outreach to the Sherborn Energy Committee, which I guess has done a wonderful job of helping to do an energy audit at Pine Hill, and I think they've been kind enough to agree to work with us at the region to see whether there are any fixtures or other things that wouldn't be coming up for their end of useful life, but might make sense to invest in, whether that's LED lights or things that might have external funding opportunities where we could invest today and then reap better energy efficiency on those. And we wanted to make sure those were on the list. We did exclude any of the big upgrades to the athletic complex or anything that Mudge Foundation might want to do in the auditorium. And then finally, just for full disclosure, we did defer discussion on the administration building. There was a similar project report done on the admin building, but I think we all agreed that after this budget season, we want to take a really thoughtful look at that building and where we might have other space across our campuses in both towns that might be able to house some of the work that's being done as opposed to putting lots of money into one particular building. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so where did we end up? So for the next 5 years, we have an average of approximately $365,000 worth of projects for the next 5 fiscal years. So fiscal year 15 is currently sitting at $315,000, which represents 20 different projects, most of them in the $10,000 to $35,000 range. Notably, it does exclude the observatory, which is currently sitting on top of the high school building that is in for $88,000, continues to remain in our parking lot. And we're hoping that there might be an opportunity to do a private-public partnership or find some individuals who might want to improve the physics program through that. So that's still in the parking lot. There are a number of energy efficiency projects that might come to bear, as well as some small athletic projects. Fiscal 16 is sitting at 432, so a little higher, and then you can see the numbers in front of you. Fiscal 17 is 396, fiscal 18 at 230, a little dip, and then fiscal 19 at 450. Obviously, any of those things could shift a little bit depending on the appetite of the towns and if we wanted to smooth anything out over time. There are a few big ticket projects looking out in fiscal 20, 23, and 25. Those would be the high school and Lindquist HVAC systems that were not touched during the renovation in '03, as well as roofs that would come out of their warranty period that would need to be looked at down the road. So again, we wanted to make sure that we had some visibility into those big numbers when they might come. There are a few caveats, as I said, obviously that there's always a chance that estimates would need to change. We've obviously done a hard look at what is in the $315,000 number for this year and feel pretty confident that that would cover the projects that we've specified for that. As I said, there's a way to shift any of those projects if there were a year where we either could or couldn't hit a particular number. We're always open to discussion on that. Anything else that would crop up, and then technology and fixtures not being part of this particular audit.
But the 5-year projections you received, that's based on everything done at the last date.
Right.
We did not put anything earlier.
Oh, I got you.
Correct.
So it really would be, would take a lot of scrutiny to decide that we could be deferred, much beyond that.
Right. And as,
Basically, you're comfortable with the 315 for the immediate future?
yes,
Correct.
very comfortable. So what does that 315 entail? That's the next slide, and just list the different projects if you're so inclined to go through them. The 20 different projects, a few vehicles, some wall work, doors, restrooms that desperately need to be done if you've ever been at a play at the middle school or high school, some flooring work, painting, lighting in the high school gym, and some locker room work.
So do we, we talked about maintenance items that might be part of this project or not part of this, maintenance items that you determined not to be capital. They're in that report, but you said, geez, they're not a capital item, so we're going to include it in the operating budget,
Right.
presumably. So,
Right.
And Stephen assured me that you guys are very careful about that, which is great to hear. That was
Right, that's the benefit of working through this entire process with Mr.
Yes.
Kelly, because he'll say, sprinkler heads should be maintenance. Painting, what he does is any of the painting projects that can be done by his team without scaffolding or major undertaking, he will make as part of his operating expenses.
Yep.
So all of that's been pulled out, and it's been a good partnership in figuring out what can be done operationally,
Right.
and then what needs to be invested in
And just so people
capital.
know, this $315,000 is the cost to the region, which will be
Correct.
split, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
Correct.
Yep, so,
So again, going back to the process, we tried to divide, defining the projects that need to be done from how do we pay for them. So we feel very comfortable that $315,000 represents the capital projects that we believe is in the best interest to maintain our buildings in the way they should be maintained for fiscal 15. So that's the number that we're coming, and the regional school committee has approved in terms of our bringing it to the different boards.
and we were kicking around a larger number before, but we pulled something out that
Correct.
I'm not familiar with what that is and where that may be residing, since it's no longer
You
here.
want to talk about it? You want me? Go for it.
If this is a good time.
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely. We actually have a need at the region for a handicapped accessible van to meet imperative students' needs for next school year. And the van was initially included in the scope of this capital campaign and would have had a figure floating in at the 362, but that van cost has been backed out and will be embedded in the operating budget
I got you.
for the region.
And also, the 47,000 that was the original estimate for the van was brought down to 32,995, so 33,000.
And you're considering that to have a short, useful life, and that's why it's an operating thing, or just the,
So we definitely need the van for the foreseeable future. So the region was contemplating as early this week whether that would be, there's definitely a desire to have that included in the operating budget. Whether it's a straight purchase or a lease
I see.
is
Yet to
still
be determined.
Yet to be
Gotcha.
determined, correct.
Paul, it sounds like you have a question?
Yeah, just, I'm looking at this list of projects, which was this year's project, and I'm hoping that somewhere on some year's project, you are going to be looking at putting solar panels up there and perhaps one or more windmills. A number of high schools that I work with, like Narragansett Regional, has got windmills. Nantucket has a windmill. Is that in here somewhere?
Oh, Richard?
You've asked a question I actually know the answer to. As far as windmills go, my understanding is we're the wrong place. We don't have that kind of wind unless you go into the stratosphere. The payback for that kind of thing is just tiny. As far as solar panels go, a few years back, we did actually, and the landscape has changed quite a bit, I understand that. We did actually begin to look at that, but that was in the context of trying to figure out how to cool down the middle school. Solar panels on the roof was not going to do the job, therefore we put it on the back burner. We are looking for guidance from experts, including experts we have here in town, as we go ahead. So the short answer to your question is yes. As we go ahead, we will be asking the question whether it makes sense to exploit those roofs for installing solar panels. There's nothing active going on in that regard yet.
Well, we have a project, a push going on in Sherborn to solarize Sherborn, to put as many solar panels on houses, individual homes, barns, and garages, and all of that stuff. And if private citizens are doing that, and these are relatively small projects, it seems like it would make sense to do it on the regional buildings. They're fairly big buildings, and it does reduce your long-term costs, and there are all kinds of credits, and you can get a contractor to advance the capital costs and all of these
To what
things.
extent have you guys already looked at that for Pine Hill or for the fire department?
I was going to ask
or-
them when that term comes up.
I think the intent was to keep the focus on what will be required to maintain the building in good standing. Early on, Dana did an interesting calculation where you look at it over the next 5 years, we're averaging still less than 1% of the capital value of the buildings to maintain them. And then the idea of bringing in the Energy Committee was with the $600,000 of lighting projects that were identified by On-Site Insight. We wanted to make sure we had folks could help us figure out, A, how to do that inexpensively, but for those that had payback, and to ensure that it was a good financial decision on behalf of both the towns before we proposed that. And I would think that we'd want to treat, solar panels and other things of that nature along the same dimension.
Thank you.
So just from my perspective, the amount, you're talking about 315,000. I always like looking at I have 2012's audited report, which does give you the full cost, if you will, of the operation of the region, and which is definitely not the cost that we vote on and, is appropriated to pay. So one of those cost elements is depreciation of the buildings and equipment, and that value is 1.1 million. So really, if you and that kicks in every year. So if you think of it that way for reasonableness, what you're suggesting is a third of what you're depreciating things at. So, it passes the sniff test. If you will.
And this year is on the lower side of what we are looking at, out 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. So the last slide just says, now that we've identified which projects that we want to put forth, then obviously we need to talk about how we pay for them. We have submitted to both towns, as you know, warrant placeholders for the amount. The amount also, as we know, has gone down from 362 to 315. We have, as Mr. Bliss described, have moved at least one, or talking about moving one of the items into the operating budget, the van, and then one of the things, obviously, we've been working on is an intermunicipal agreement that would be able to cover how each town would prefer to pay for that. So I don't know if you want to talk about that now, or?
Sure, I'd love to.
All right.
We've
All right.
We've worked out all the, answered all the questions, as far as I can tell, that we were asking about this intermunicipal agreement.
Correct.
We've had the legal review. We've obtained the opinion so that we were asking from bond counsel Manley, and we have gotten the latest draft, which reflects the revised amount.
Right.
Or it's not, and in fact, it's no longer a draft. He sent a final version, so that doesn't have draft up on the top. So I was gonna, yeah, so I'm gonna ask the gents here, my colleagues, if you want to add some more value to it, but we appreciate, the other part, the big question, there was a question about, this is it's a 1 year only, it's on a project basis, which was important to us.
Right.
And perhaps also to our friends in Dover. And it also clarified, there was some confusion over the cost allocation. It's doing it based as if it were debt, and therefore the percentage in this agreement is outlined using the appropriate cost allocation that you would allocate debt in the budgeting process here, right? Debt service, for example.
So when we were together, I think it was a month ago to the day, I think, Selectman Durensis had some things that he wanted to ensure were reflected in the scope of not only the construct of the IMA, but also in correspondence from Attorney Manley.
Excuse me, Diane. You got to get even the split here doesn't, my colleague here picked up, the split isn't the appropriate split, so we really need the version that Stephen had sent with the right numbers.
I have that.
Maybe you have that and can send it, Diane? You don't have it? Okay.
You had that in there.
I have it on my phone. I'll get to it.
I have it on my phone, too.
Somebody wants to send it to me?
All right. What's your email address, Diane?
Yeah.
Hang on. Oh, yeah.
Right, but I think they
Don't know
just-
what happened.
It's just, what is it? Diane. I'm sorry I'm doing this on the fly. I can listen, too.
So we want to make sure that that Attorney Manley had also provided correspondence to you, and we had 2 pieces of correspondence we hope satisfied your concerns, Selectman Durensis, and in addition, we are fairly confident that all the terms in the IMA speak to what you asked be reflected, and that was from our meeting on the 5th, actually, it wasn't, it was the 15th of January.
The key thing that I wanted to see is right here in paragraph 3, which says that the town of Sherborn's obligation to pay its share of the costs is expressly made contingent upon appropriation of Sherborn's allocation of said costs by the Sherborn 2014 annual town meeting. Because I wanted to preserve to the voters the right to consider this project, and if they vote it down, then this agreement doesn't still require us to come forward with the money. So we want to leave it, we didn't want to take away from the voters their right to vote.
Certainly not. We don't want to presuppose the vote at the town meeting. So we were pretty thoughtful about making sure that everything was in here, as you had requested, and then this went before Sherborne's Town Council, Attorney Manley, back and forth a couple more times, and Dover Town Council. So we're confident that it reflects what is needed, and we thank
Sure, the other thing I did was check with the treasurer. We checked with the treasurer just to make sure there were no issues with having the funds available when needed and so forth, and there are none that have been brought to my attention. And nor have there been any issues brought to my attention in terms of whether things are bondable or not. I know last year when we did this insight report, used it to come up with what we were going to raise on a debt exclusion override. Some of the items had to be pulled out. Now, I'm assuming, which is a bad thing, you know what that does, but I'm presuming that we won't have that issue here.
Right.
There's nothing on the regional list
That
that
would,
had to be pulled out.
great. So I'm sure we're fine. Let's presume we're fine.
So I'm ready to sign.
All right, so I'll take a motion
Get-
to approve signing that, and we'll get the clean copy, and we're ready to go.
So moved.
Provided it's corrected, yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, we have the correct signable copy. All in favor, or any further discussion?
Are we authorizing the chair to sign, or? all
I think
three of
it's
us?
asked for all three of us to sign, doesn't it? I saw us-
BIA calls for
And do we have any issues with
All
town
three.
seal?
all three signatures.
Yeah.
As
So-
well as in Dover.
I thought it was just me, but I see that there's
Yeah.
spot for all three.
That's right.
They were all on the
They're all on board.
And in a conversation I had in a meeting last night with Chairman Dolly in Dover, he is prepared with his board to sign on Monday evening
Great.
next week.
So we should probably do a couple of copies here that we sign?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Diane printing them for us?
I hope so.
We hope, yeah.
Yeah, and if not, we'll sign them after the meeting, I mean.
Yeah,
that's-
we can sign them after the meeting,
We
get
should
them to you
finish that
quickly.
vote, though.
Okay.
But, so, absent any further discussion, we'll take a vote. All in favor? There you go. Just all we have to do now is sign.
Thank you
And
so much.
We fielded all your questions that
On the capital side?
Yeah, I had, those are the ones I had. I think that's great. You've done a nice job there, and I encourage people to look up that report as well as this presentation on the Dover Sherborn Regional School website.
Absolutely.
We'll get it posted first thing in the morning, and just to publicly thank Dana and Richard,
Yeah, I know you
Dana,
were.
Richard, and Michael for just incredible leadership in the regional school committee.
Oh,
this
real
year.
hard work, and also patience for everybody, for us to get to where we need to get to, but it's worth the wait.
Absolutely.
It was.
I want to commend you
time, so
on the
we wanna make sure
approach
we get it right.
of doing what's needed to be done each year, rather than coming in with a $3, $5, $10 million project. This is a much better way to do it. Do what needs to be done in the years that it needs to be done.
That's right.
Exactly.
We appreciate the spirit of cooperation and the open communication. Thank you.
Well, it's mainly because I still have a kid there. I mean, that's really all.
And Katie's done, will that stop?
Once she's gone,
We got one
forget
more
about
year.
it. Yeah,
more
no
year.
No more Mr. Nice Guy,
Oh,
yeah.
wait till you see next year's appropriation.
Mike still has one more here, too.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think we'll.
Thanks very much. So I think
Thank
we're
you.
up for Pine Hill School
for-
then.
oh, let me grab
Thank you
another
for
binder.
coming over. Really appreciate it.
Oh, I didn't even get stopped at the border, it was great.
Oh, no.
Just don't speed.
Or try to go at the police entrance.
Yeah,
Give us a second to shift gears here.
absolutely.
Change school districts.
You wear multiple hats. You go to a few meetings.
Every night. We love it, Mr. Caruso.
Good evening.
Hi, Frank.
Frank, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
We have Frank Hess, Chair of the Pine Hill School Committee with Superintendent
Right, and
Bliss.
in addition, we have members of the Pine Hill School Building Committee, Matt Burgestresser Greg Garland, Sean Kaleem, Keisha Lifton, and Frank Hook is also here from the school committee. So, do you have the packet in front of you?
I have the packet with a nice memo on front, right?
Okay.
Wait, I don't.
It was in the packaging material.
Oh, it's right here.
Oh, okay, we found it.
You've got it? Okay, you have before you the one-year request, and as Michael noted on the region, this is also probably less than ours will be ongoing, but this is the request for this, rather conservative request for this 1 year. And on this list of items
So we
here-
should be looking at this page, Frank?
Yes.
Yeah. okay,
Right.
it's the third page.
Um,
There you go.
It lists some things that we are not actually asking for money for this year, but we want to give you some history so you know that we're reaching out in all the little pockets to use all the monies that are available. So some of these things listed here are from the 2012 town meeting, 2013 town meeting, and there's one that goes back to the 2002 town meeting. And that was a very specific article at that time that was only for heating air handlers like you have on the roof. And they were able to hold on and continue using the ones they had up to now, but those are now being replaced, and we're actually using pieces from 3 different town meetings, including a request for the present one to help fund that particular piece. So this includes the heating units and windows and flooring, insulation, a tractor, and those are also on there. We have listed the assistive technology to show you that we did go out, and the Mudge Foundation
Oh, good.
actually provided the funds for the assistive technology for the hearing impaired at the Pine Hill School Auditorium. So the actual request is $111,761 for this particular year. And attached to it, we attached the quotes that we have on some of these things to be our guide going forward. Some of them will have to go out to bid, but these are the figures that we have at this time. Also, you should know that over this past year, aside from the other projects we have ongoing, is that the Energy Committee, the Green Energy Committee, has provided $53,000 worth of lighting upgrades, both interior and exterior lighting. So that has already taken place, and I think some things we've gotten from Michael Lesser have shown you that already it seems to have an impact on some of the utility bills.
So you're seeing that already, that's,
Yeah,
that's
it's
great.
very-
Yeah.
Right. And also, I think you know the governor has a new task force on school security. It's got our... And so both the superintendent and myself have been in touch with Chief Thompson, and I'm sure he'll be up on all those things. And if he finds anything that in his studies or the result of those task force that we should be doing, then he will let us know, and we will incorporate
You'll add
those
that
things.
to this, yeah.
Well, not necessarily for this year, but going forward. Those, they won't have the results of that probably till this summer at least.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. I didn't see anything here for security.
Right. Well, this past year, we did spend $53,000 for security
Okay.
in various areas, which I think we talked about in executive session.
Okay.
But there's nothing in this particular group right here, but going forward, we let the chief know that we want to know any suggestions he has along that line.
I, for one, would really encourage you, when you're making choices, between better insulation and better security and things like that, that you put a priority on security. There are crazy people out there in the world, and while we don't have any reason to expect anything like that might come anywhere near Sherborn, it's better to invest in security just to be safe.
That's our feeling. That's why we reached out to the chief, and he's ready to give us advice when he has it.
The other thing I want to push is, like, as I said before, solar power or windmill power that you're seeing, I'm seeing in schools across the state.
Right. Our roof is rather tenuous in places, okay? And we were thinking about repairing certain sections where there's ponding, but it's not leaking, so we've held off. So I'm not sure it would be able to take the weight. But we are due in year 9 in the study, which I think is now 7 years out, to do perhaps a complete re-roofing. And so that probably would be the time to look at it. And you'd have to really study Pine Hill and see if it can take it, because in the storm we had, where we had to shove the roof off, there was actually some sagging in the roof, and they had to go up there with shovels. And if we had the solar things up there raised, or wherever they were, it might be hard to do that without damaging some of the panels that might be up there. So that'd have to be studied. But we're not against doing that, but we want to do it safely. We don't want to damage the present roof or shorten its life.
Yeah, no, I remember when I was on advisory years ago, the solar possibility over there came up a couple of times, a couple of different years. And one of the reasons why it never went forward, besides the economics weren't attractive at the time, was the concern over the roof. It has a special membrane or something, and
Yeah.
there's nobody making it anymore, and there was concerns about penetrating that special membrane and not being able to repair it. So I hear what you're saying.
We'll certainly explore the solar options, both at the region and at Pine Hill.
They don't have to go on roofs.
Right.
They
Parking
can
lots.
go on the ground, parking lots, there's a whole variety.
Big hamster wheels for the playground, too.
Let's use the kids' energy, that's all it is. Frank, can I ask you a question about this? So you've got some amounts that you're referring to at different ATMs. I presume you've gotten those from the town accountant or whatever.
Right.
And
Christine
and-
Kay got them from
Oh,
the
okay,
treasurer.
good,
Yeah.
perfect, yep.
Yeah.
And you're comfortable that what you're talking about, remember last year there were some adjustments 11th hour because of this bonding capability or not. You're comfortable that what's in the list here is all presumably bondable?
In our opinion,
Based on what
it
you know?
is.
Yeah, okay.
Net of what was already
Yes.
funded, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay. And here's a question for you. So you guys need a tractor to do plowing and whatnot over at the school?
Yeah.
So I don't know how that relates to what CM&D does and its equipment. And that's just a question worth us figuring out a little bit. I don't doubt that the need, it's just,
Yeah. Peter, Mr. Gimlet does an incredible amount of snow removal, actually, at Pine Hill.
Yeah.
In fact, not only has Peter been involved in that, but Ralph Kelly occasionally has to go up and also help out with snow removal at Pine Hill. So on any day when it snows, I tend to come in very early, in the middle of the night, kind of 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'll go up to campus, and it's not unusual at all. In fact, it's more common to see Peter already there on the tractor. The other day, he was trying to make a repair amidst a snowstorm to the tractor itself, sort of on the fly. So it's a needed piece of equipment. And in supporting documentation, we provided some additional details in addition to the empirical data surrounding its repair, historical repair work. There's also some commentary provided by Mr. Gimlet himself, just about the delicacy of
Yes.
having to manipulate.
well, I thought the memo that Chris had done
Yes.
was great. That was very helpful.
Yes, thank you.
And this is for what, sidewalk and walk and entranceway plowing? Is that-
Right.
Does the tractor get used for anything else during the year?
I think he sometimes moves mulch with it and things
Yeah.
like that, but it's mainly a wintertime thing.
And there's also, we have a tractor need also at the region
Yep.
as well. So, and you look at a day like yesterday, and there's an enormous pull on that equipment. Obviously, it took them from yesterday. I mean, at the region, I was in at 3:30 or so in the morning, and they did not stop until I left my office at 7 o'clock last night. So, and they're moving the whole time.
Is it possible to share a tractor with the region?
The problem is the uses become mutually exclusive. It's kind of like, like in the winter, they're needed at both campuses at both times. I mean, it's by and large. And at the region, we have a few tractors because of the field work that gets done as well. So that's, there's considerably more equipment that goes on. And we have 2 groundskeepers at the region.
So the town basically opens up the road, maybe does some other stuff, but to get access onto the sidewalk and safely into school, you guys are doing that.
Right, yeah. I mean, and what Mr. Wagner's crew does provides ingress and egress to the campus, and then beyond that, in terms of the real cleanup that needs to get done, that's really done by
Gotcha.
Peter. Yeah.
And it's a tractor, not a snow blower?
Oh, it's a tractor.
Yeah.
Tractor, yeah.
Great.
And not a good one.
Yeah.
We're getting that impression.
We're getting
We
it.
should go up there during a snowstorm.
Yeah, it's quite a scene. Sean has helped us, he's helped us out on occasion up at the campus, and we thank him for that, too. I know. With snow removal.
Great. All right.
Well, again, I commend the thought process that goes into the step-by-step approach of doing what needs to be done year by year. Because the big picture is, if we don't invest in our buildings, we're going to have to end up replacing them, and the cost of replacing them is quite substantial.
And it's really, before I forget, Mr. Hess does just an incredible job with the committee. But in addition, one thing that's been incredibly helpful this year is having Mr. Bob Searle, who, from the Capital Committee, who attends faithfully all of our meetings. And that has just proven incredibly helpful in terms of refining, the flow of communication and what Capital Committee's thinking. And he gives us increased visibility into what's going on with other town projects. So that's been, I think, in my opinion, a huge asset to our work this year. Thank you, Bob.
So how can we help you succeed in making sure this goes through?
Well, make sure that it, gets on the ballot and
Sure.
perhaps speak in favor of it at town meeting. And
Just a question, why there's $5,000 of RFP-related costs for the rooftop units on a $31,000 item?
Well, I can't give you the exact reason, but I know that on all these, it seems, even the windows, it was a very big RFP cost. You have to have an engineer come out when it's over a certain amount of money and do all sorts of calculations and specs, and they end up really writing the bid specs when you do it.
So that's the cost of the bid specs?
They're doing a lot of that work.
It's like a big
Big ticket.
tax on the cost of the item.
Yeah, it was in the windows, too, yeah.
I'll remind you, we're spending a lot more than that on the fire station heating system. Because you're rolling design into RFP,
Mm-hmm.
so, it's engineering.
Is that true here too, Sean?
What's that?
Is that true here also with this?
Well,
request?
yeah, I mean, what he just said, he's stating it as RFP, but there's some design work. I mean, you can't just call someone and say, replace these units.
Okay.
They have to do some HVAC engineering to make sure they don't.
It's not
have
like
that.
there's a model number on them, you just change them out, you
Not
actually...
really, because it's probably
redesign.
20-something years
Yeah,
old.
okay.
Great.
All right.
All right, well,
Thank you.
thanks very much again. It's great
Thank
to
you,
see you.
everyone. Good to see you
Your
again.
day started at like 5
day
in the
started
morning with
together.
meetings, and
We're
we
ending our day
met
together.
at 7, and here we are
Late
again.
morning, he was up at 3 this...
Yeah, I know, he's slacking this morning, he slept in.
What's that?
He
I said
slept
it was a
in.
late morning, if it was only 5, you said it was 3 yesterday, right?
It's amazing what you get done that early in the morning. Get a lot of work done.
Thanks.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. They
So Diane has those, and she's got the seal on them and everything, so 3 copies.
Wow.
Oh, 3 original.
Very efficient.
Originals. Right?
We've signed it. You got it?
Yeah, and I went downstairs and had the seal for one.
Beautiful.
Okay, so
Sweet.
do you want to give them?
So give them to Steve.
I don't know.
Yeah. Superintendent gets the IMA however he wants it.
Ready to go?
What's good stuff.
Energy.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks again. See you around. See you Saturday.
See you Saturday. Yeah. Together all day. Have a good one.
See ya.
Sheesh. It's good. I like the guy. Okay, so we have next the Energy Committee.
Right.
All right, Gene. How are you? Nice to see you again. Tell us who's up at the table, if you would, please.
My pleasure. Tonight, we have 2 people from Solar Flare that have seen us through a very successful campaign to bring more solar and renewable energy to town. We have Dan Greenwood, Vice President of Sales
Yeah.
at Solar Flare, and Mike Perkins, who many people have probably seen around town as he's been the main driving force of sales in Sherborn and Dover and surrounding areas. So the Solar Challenge outreach ended January 17th, and now the next phase is installations. But just to go over the numbers and to give you an update and sort of a wrap-up of how our campaign went and the success we had, Dan has some statistics to share, and hopefully you got some of those numbers in advance.
Yep.
We did.
Okay, terrific. And just to explain what happened, but it's been a pleasure, I just want to say, working with Solar Flare, and especially these two guys. They took tremendously good care of us.
Thanks, Jane. And so, yeah, I sent the numbers out in advance, but I'm assuming that there's probably a little interpretation needed, which I can walk through them with you. So what we did over the last 5.5 months or so is to engage the community through various forms of outreach, and through that effort, that first number that you see, 151 people expressed an interest between Sherborn and Dover, and of those, we ended up visiting 110 homes, which is that's a pretty good indication that the outreach got to the right people, the houses that were probably the best candidates for solar. And then of those, 107 people were interested to get a proposal. The goal that we had set at the beginning of the program was 200 kilowatts worth of solar. So in your average size system, that's probably 35 to 40 homes. We ended up signing contracts with 34 people, 34 homes. But the average system size for the town was much larger than most places in the state, which was great. So we went much further beyond the 200 kilowatt goal that we had set in 269 kilowatts. With that, there's a big discount for the customers. So the more people that signed up under this program, the cheaper the price got for everybody. And by reaching that highest level and the highest goal that we had set, everybody saved thousands of dollars on their solar installation compared to what the market price would be. Does anybody have any questions about the numbers?
Nope, that's good.
I also thought, just to put it in context, I thought I'd share with you that we did similar programs, and the state has done similar programs in other towns throughout Massachusetts. They just wrapped up a Solarized Mass program in 10 different communities, and the numbers were really interesting. So Sherborn Solar Challenge closed 32% of the proposals that were sent out there. So about 3 out of 10 people who got a proposal decided to move forward, which was exactly the same as what the Solarized program was. So that's a pretty consistent number through varied communities. The other communities were Brookline, Newton, Bourne, Northampton, Lee. So it was all over the state, but that number is pretty consistent, about 3 in 10 people. Of the initial interest, so of the 151, there was about 23% of those that ended up with signed contracts, and that's well above the average of 18% from the previous program. So the numbers here were very impressive, and I think a lot of it had to do with the outreach, getting to the right people and educating the people to know what made a good house for solar. We had a great experience here in the town, and it was a privilege to work here, and we really appreciate being selected. I want to thank Jane for all her hard work. Without her efforts, none of this could have happened. She really did a great job of getting out to the people and letting them know what the opportunity was, and enough people went forward to make it worthwhile for everybody that was involved. I also want to thank the Board of Selectmen for their support, and in particular, especially at the beginning, David Williams and Paul Durensis for helping out, especially Jane and the Energy Committee
Couple
and
of
the
good guys
Selection
here.
Committee. Yes. And then the Energy Committee themselves, who obviously had the foresight to not only put this program into action, but then to also choose us, which we are very appreciative of. And that was John Higley, Gino Carlucci, and Michael Lesser. And And then during the program, we did a nice infomercial that we broadcast out to as many people as we could, and Jim Nayland helped us with that. And one of our earliest customers for Solar Flare, nothing to do with this program, was Ed Rose. And Ed was very supportive throughout, even before we were selected, giving everybody the straight scoop on what solar was all about and what it meant to him and his business. And he was supportive throughout the whole program and allowed us to use his facility to show off solar and to show people what it was all about. We also had a couple of volunteers, Sam Gabransky and Johnny Coots, who also helped with the outreach program to literally go out and hand-to-hand get to people and let them know that, hey, there's this great program going on in Sherborn and Dover, and you should get involved. So again, we appreciate all your efforts, and we thank you for choosing us. As far as the program goes, we're still going to be here for the next 6 months or so, doing all the installations. So we're working with the building department, the electric department, doing a great job. We always do a good quality job, and I don't foresee that anybody's going to hear any complaints about Solar Flare. So we'll be in the community, and we'll be looking to do even more if people are still interested in doing
So
solar.
people can still sign up for this once they start seeing some installations
They
and
sure
pay
can.
attention to what we're talking about.
The deadline has passed, and so the best price, the Tier 5 pricing, that has passed. But we can still offer a very good price. I think it would be unfair to the people who did sign up by the deadline to offer that same
Right.
price, but it'll still be good competitive pricing, and we encourage people to sign up and contact us. And people still have been, even though the deadline has passed, 2 or 3 people have come in just in the last week or so. So yeah, we're happy to do more projects, and I think it would be great for the town to have more solar. And it'll be interesting to see, it's going to start going up, and people are going to see it as they're driving by houses and get a feel for what it looks like, and talk to the owners about what it means to them and what the paybacks are and how much energy they're saving.
Well, that allows me to jump in with sort of the overview here,
Mm-hmm.
that solar power is clean.
Mm-hmm.
And solar power, the source of energy is the sun, which is
Correct.
itself free. It's beneficial to not only our community, but our state and our nation, that more and more of our homeowners rely less on fossil fuels and nuclear fuels and more on these natural, renewable
Mm-hmm.
energy. It makes the United States energy independent. It's cleaner for the atmosphere, global warming, and all of those issues. This is the wave of the future. And at some point here, when we are looking at things like zoning updates and the rest, and when the state is looking at its building code, at some point maybe we should be requiring solar panels on new construction,
Sure.
almost as an automatic piece of new development, just so that energy does not get out of control again. The cost of energy, the demands, those big coal-fired plants in the Mid-Atlantic states belching black smoke into the atmosphere. I mean, hopefully those days are all gone. And part of the way of ending that is to put solar panels on every building that we can.
Sure.
So I thank you for what you've done. You've not only benefited people economically, because at the end these things will pay off and then provide dividends over time, but you've benefited the town of Sherborn, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the nation.
Sure. Thank you. And we will continue to do the same.
There you go. Beautiful. Well, that's great. Appreciate the update. I'm glad to see we're not an outlier here, or at least we're on track with the way everybody else seems to do it in terms of
For sure. Well,
closings and
and I would say that
option and so forth.
you are an outlier in a good way, though, because these communities are the ones who also have really made a commitment to clean energy. So if you were to compare your numbers and these numbers to other towns, or even the state average, you're well above. So these are the towns that were selected by the state because they were the most progressive and most interested in a program like this. And then Sherborn is right there with those towns, and it's very impressive because, to be honest, it's a smaller population than most of those towns, but 269 kilowatts and 34 projects was much more than a lot of other towns that were involved in similar programs. So it's great. It's great to see.
Excellent.
Yeah, I did actually, just to compare some of the other towns that were in solarized mass with our population. Since we have 269 kilowatts going to be our capacity, about 4,000 households over Sherborn, that's about 1 kilowatt per 14 houses. When I did this, when I looked at the Chelmsford, Carlisle, and Newton, theirs were getting up into the 1 to 20 houses, 1 to 40 houses. So Sherborn, we had to reach the same 200 kilowatts to get to the lowest price with a much smaller population. So I think it says a lot about our population, and that people are willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to the environment and the future. Also that it's such a great investment. You know, they are forward-looking. I think it's fantastic. I think it sets a really great example for our children, but also for other communities, surrounding communities that are sort of following in our footsteps. We'll go down that road right now. As we see more panels on roofs, it's been said that maybe solar panels are the new granite countertop. So maybe that is sort of a material that can be thought of a little more often for new construction, Maple Street project, Rising Tide. So, you know, that's just, I think, a really good thing to have in the background, and it'll become much more visible in the future. What's the build-out time frame? 6 to 8 months for our projects?
Yes,
Will
I
we
think
start seeing them?
8 months would be the very outside, a little bit dependent on this bad weather we've been having.
Yep.
But yeah, 6 to 8 months is safe.
Okay, awesome. That's great.
Excellent. Well, that's terrific.
Okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, for the work you've done.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so I think we're up with Nancy Hess. We're getting a Hess twofer tonight. Yeah, I was going to say, you guys sure know how to have a good time together.
What could be better than coming to a Sherborn Selectmen's meeting?
Yep. Hey, Nancy.
Oh, she's brought the law book and everything.
I did. It's the Bible.
Go for it, Nancy. What do you got going here? This is your warrant article, pardon me, your warrant article to change the name of tax collector to town collector.
Okay. Last year, when I presented a similar article to change my title from tax collector to town collector, I clearly did not take enough time to address all the concerns that emerged as people tried to become familiar with the law that's cited in the article. I had some of the same concerns, especially about the word shall and all, when I started, but I reached a level of comfort regarding those concerns through conversations with the Department of Revenue and by surveying the members of the Mass Collectors Treasurers Association. And I did that actually before I petitioned for the article. Now I'd like to try to clear up some of the misunderstandings about the law and about my reasons for submitting this article again. I would be happy to respond to any questions, but I would respectfully ask that you hold them until I've finished to make a more coherent presentation, since, as Peter always says, this is also an opportunity to educate the public, and two, since Diane always has her stopwatch running. No fewer than 3 of our recent town administrators, and maybe more, have asked me if I would be willing to receive funds other than taxes and the related charges. I have always said yes, but as a tax collector, I am prohibited by law from doing that. My title would have to be changed to a town collector. As a matter of fact, when Jim Purcell was here, he wanted to put that very change on the warrant for a special fall town meeting, which you ultimately decided not to have. The Department of Revenue, in their review, recommended that the tax office be the collection point for more of the town's funds. That recommendation was not a philosophical one regarding the government structure. It was on process and had to do with the town's funds and best practice regardless of whether the town has combined, separate, appointed, or elected officials. It is a process that needs to be instituted in phases, so that what works is kept and what doesn't is discarded. But starting that process does not need to be held hostage to other decisions. It was suggested by the gentleman from the Department of Revenue that using the town meeting vote allows a greater flexibility than a bylaw or legislated change. I asked the Department of Revenue at that time if I could just agree to take other payments, and they said no, it requires the change in my title. Since this year, there seemed to be some misconception about whether I could just agree to do this. Still, I recently wrote to the Department of Revenue Legal Division and asked if they could send me an email with simple, clear, concise language. And I'd like to share the response with you. I also have a few other documents with a line or two to share with you, and I have copies for each, so that you can look at them in more detail later if you so choose. And I'll give these to you.
So a little homework, huh, Nancy? Thank you.
We need just 3 of these, or we
Well, I
want...
think probably David and
Okay, they're all the same, though, right?
all the same. The first document is from the email that the Department of Revenue sent me, and I'd like to read an excerpt from the 3rd paragraph. A tax collector has no authority to collect accounts other than taxes in the absence of a bylaw or town meeting vote under General Law, Chapter 41, Section 38A. And then I'd like to read an excerpt from a paragraph from the official legal opinion written at the request of the Nantucket tax collector in 1988, which was included with my email from the Department of Revenue. And it says, a tax collector, pursuant to General Law, Chapter 60, Section 2, possesses authority to collect only those taxes, together with charges, etc., that are set forth in tax lists and warrants committed to the collector by the assessors. The next document that you have contains pages from the Collector's Manual, which is somewhat our Bible in conjunction with this book of Mass General Laws. I'd like you to refer to Chapter 1, Section A1, A2, and Section B, which really is Tax Collection 101, and it's really relatively short. But it says a tax collector is an elected or appointed public officer to whom taxes, together with excises, etc., certain other charges added to and committed as taxes, are committed for collection. And the second paragraph reiterates that by saying a tax collector possesses authority to collect only those receivables listed in the first section. And it says in Part B, Section 1, by voting to accept the law cited in the article, a city or town may extend its collector's authority to the collection of all accounts due the city or town. On the next page, which is actually Chapter 7, It says, in order to authorize a collector to collect departmental receipts, the city or town must make that collector a city or town collector by town meeting or city council action. And the next page has a very interesting line about other collections. It says, a city or town collector may also be responsible for collecting certain fees and permits. Hence, some of the confusion, because the law says shall, and that brings us to your last handout, which is the actual law with the troublesome language, shall and all. A city or town may by ordinance, bylaw, or vote, notwithstanding any other provision of law, general or special, provide that the collector of taxes shall collect under the title of city or town collector all accounts due the city or town. It is upon the continuation of that first sentence that cities and towns across Massachusetts hang their hats when they choose to have their collectors collect only selected funds, because it continues, and may, in like manner, define his powers and duties in relation to the collection of such accounts. In my survey, I did not find one collector who collected all of their town's funds. To add to the confusion, in Section 1 of Chapter 60, which is also in that handout, the definition of a collector is really the definition of a tax collector, because it requires a commitment to collect. There are other examples of dual use of the terms in the law, as seen again on your last page, Section 13. When I asked the Department of Revenue about the inconsistency, they said they recognized the confusion, but would not be looking to enforce the detail of this law unless there were other irregularities. I suggested they fix the law, and they said they would not be interested in sponsoring such narrow legislation. I asked if they would oppose someone else doing it, and they said the official response would be that they do not comment on legislation until it is before them. The unofficial response was, go for it. So that is what I'm doing. Representative Linsky has agreed to work with the lobbyist from the Mass Collectors Treasurers Association to sponsor a change in the language to make it clearer that a town collector is not required to collect all the town's funds, but is authorized to collect any. They both said they thought this would be simple and probably not take the full legislative cycle. I met with Representative Linsky on Monday, and he's hopeful that this can be completed by town meeting. It would be a shame to lose another whole year. It has been suggested that the article be submitted without the contingent language, but I am not a masochist. I recognize it would be very difficult to bring all our attorneys to the same comfort level with the conflicting language. I am willing to not handle funds for something that I am authorized to collect, especially when the issue is surrounded by so much gray area. But I am not willing to handle funds that I am clearly prohibited by law from collecting. So why am I doing this at all when so obviously it means more work for me? First, it was one of the recommendations resulting from the Department of Revenue review for which I could recognize a sound rationale. And secondly, because again, I have been asked to help. The request is reasonable, and I would like to cooperate. But as I've tried to demonstrate here tonight, my hands are tied. What I can do now is extremely limited. And when all is said and done, I still need to be able to sleep at night. It is my hope that this title change and phasing in of the collection of any new funds can be a collaborative effort between the Board of Selectmen, through the town administrator, any department that might participate, and the collector's office, and that we can start now but take the time to get it right for all those stakeholders and for the people who depend on our services. Now, if I haven't put you to sleep and you have a question, I might be able to answer you.
I would have two questions, Nancy. One, and I appreciate you educating us further on this and being careful about this word shall that did come up last year at the last minute and scared a lot of people, including myself. And your willingness to actually help in what makes practical sense, collecting, making other collections besides taxes. That's great. So if Representative Linsky or the legislature doesn't make the change, then this becomes a moot point? Other
That-
than people would approve it until such time it does change?
I would have
First
to
question.
defer to the attorneys in the room of whether you can take a town meeting vote on contingent language or whether it would have to be a moot question.
Okay. And my second question, which might also be for the attorneys in the room. Let's say next election cycle, let's say this passes, let's say the legislature changes the word from shall to may or whatever. Now are we electing a town collector in that situation? Is there such an electable position?
It is my understanding that it just changes the title.
All right, those are my questions.
So Nancy, have you or anybody sought town council's opinion on what that statute means?
You mean the way it's written now?
Well, yeah, I mean, to get some comfort from town council as to an interpretation of what that means.
No, I have not. I have relied on, I've relied basically on the Department of Revenue. I've had a lot of conversations with Zach, who did the review here, and he took it to, actually last year, he took it to the Enforcement Division, and they said, we're not going out to any cities and towns with our guns and badges over this thing. There's just too much confusion on the interpretation of, and the practice has been that most cities and towns don't feel as restricted as we did when we were talking about the shall and so
But
forth.
that's why I'm wondering if town council might be able to give some comfort that would avoid all the rigmarole that you're going through now.
Well, the Department of Revenue seemed to recognize that the law says one thing, the practice is another, and there are some holes, as I've tried to show you in some of the examples there, the interchange of language.
The law says both things.
It does. I mean, it does seem like that, but I'm not, the Department of Revenue is good at dancing around some things when you ask them questions, but they didn't seem to be, Zach said to me that for every lawyer that's there, he would give you a different answer on the interpretation of that law. And that was another reason that I thought that even if this didn't pass here in Sherborn, it might be helpful to the other cities and towns who right now have collectors that are breaking the law if it's taken literally in one sense, and make it clear for everybody. If that's not their intent, to restrict anybody using that title from doing anything but taking everything. And I did, when I wrote to the Department of Revenue, I used some extreme examples because you could interpret that to mean that the $2 the seniors pay for their lunches at the senior drop-in has to be collected at the tax office before they go to lunch. And the library fees would have to come through the tax collector. That's absurd, and nobody does anything like that. And I did survey many of the collectors and treasurers around the state, and they sent me lists of things, and they said, we don't collect this and we don't collect that, but we collect boat permits and pond fees and things like that. So it's actually, in practice, going to fit better if we change the language.
But it's going to slow us down.
But it's going to what?
It'll slow us down. It'll slow things down unless it's passed in the next
Well,
few weeks.
yes, unless it can be taken as a vote contingent on what happens in the legislature, but I don't know if that's illegal.
I guess that's why I'm wondering if town council is able, based on what she knows and other experience she's had, is able to opine whether we're better off getting that opinion and at least having a basis for going forward with this, unless and until the legislature acts.
Well, I'm happy to have, her give an opinion on this. And I'm hoping that you all will embrace this, because right now the only things that we're considering are things that have come as suggestions out of your office. So, and you control town council, so.
Seems to me it makes the most sense to consolidate collections as much as we can and have controls on those collections, and you provide that avenue, your office does.
Well, and I don't think it's something that we want to do precipitously. I think we want to find piece by piece what works so that we're not inconveniencing the residents or really messing up a process that anybody has in their department. I know last year I spoke to some other people in other departments, and they were a little excited about getting the money out of their offices. So, it's going to be what makes sense and what works best, and I think should be a gradual thing. Also, to see what kind of impact it has on my office. We certainly don't want to have governmental creep here either, so.
Great. Paul, any questions? You're good? All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Okay.
Always an education. And your ride's still here. That's good.
Well, is she his ride, or
Yeah,
is he her
I don't
ride?
know. It's a joint venture. It's her car, she said. All right, that brings us to the bottom parts of the agenda here, TA report, upcoming meeting topics, et cetera, et cetera. I know advisory canceled last night.
Yeah, that was
So-
one, before, yeah, that was one
for it.
issue. You got to take all my issues before.
No, I want you to tell me what's what.
Snowflakes and they canceled? I mean, where's these hardy New Englanders?
Well, police and CM&D were signed up for last night, and I couldn't drag them in while they were out on the road. So that was one part of it.
Made good sense to cancel.
Yeah, so,
Dover Warren had their meeting last night, but I don't think they had those guys on their agenda.
Well, that's for the reason. Maybe they were in the
Yeah. They were in the rain belt.
rain belt.
so the Board of Selectmen departments are being rescheduled to next Wednesday night and the 26th. So there's a school vacation week there.
Yeah. But you've been working with Mary Wolf, Chair of Advisory.
Oh, continually, yeah.
And so
Emailing
it sounds
back
like
and
they're
forth.
very flexible on
Yeah,
getting this done.
yeah, and we have another meeting scheduled with her on Monday to discuss some of the issues from our last meeting.
Yep.
On things that we might like to see added back in. So, free cash was certified at 1.3 million. That came in the last few days.
$1,352,947.
Perfect. 1.3.
That's 50.
59,055.
Yeah.
more.
Big number.
In
Right.
a community like this, an extra 50,000
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
often quite important.
Yeah. So, we also have, we had the fire department HVAC project out to bid, so those bids are being opened tomorrow. So far, we have about 13 bids.
Oh,
This was the money approved at last year's annual town meeting.
great.
The insulation project for the fire department was awarded. We did that through a quote process, and that is the same money from town meeting. And there is some conservation grant money that's being spent on both of those projects.
Or energy, is it energy?
Energy
Grant?
efficiency grant,
Yeah.
yeah.
Gotcha.
I wanted to ask about meeting on the 20th during school vacation week. Are we not meeting that week, or are we planning to meet that week?
It would be good not to meet that week. What, is that a big warrant? So we still got to deal with a warrant, right? Isn't that 2 weeks?
It would be in
It's
2
a
weeks.
big warrant. So
Right.
it's one of these bad boys.
Right, but if I tell them now that
We could do it
maybe
the
they could
following
have some
Monday
sort of impact,
or
yeah.
Tuesday morning,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Makes sense
Would
to
that be
me.
good?
Yeah.
That
Okay.
works?
So Town Hall will be closed on February 17th in observance of President's Day, and those are the only items I have right now.
Okay. So talking about upcoming meeting items, I was thinking, I don't know whether it was shoveling the driveway or whatever, but, it'd be good if we had a workshop in the morning where we could have department heads in, and we do a brainstorming about how to, I don't know what you'd call it, but we could think about it. But the idea is, how do we serve the residents better for less, that, the bang for the buck, better bang for the buck, or whatever. Also, and improve communications and all that kind of stuff. I think it would be useful for us to be part of that and the department head. So let's talk further offline on that. The other thing would be good is when you're ready, David, to I call it a numbers night of audit draft, GASB 45, and the 6-month report that Ruth has promised to get done. And just kind of cover that in broad strokes. But for the audit report, it's a draft so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page with the draft so they can go to press with the thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So probably not too distant. And, those are a couple of these. And I guess we have scheduled a variety of warrant article items coming up in the near term, right, Diane?
Yeah, we'll bring them all.
Yeah. So like next week, you have some scheduled. You might have some scheduled for the 20th even. So maybe you can bring one sooner and one later. Great. Okay. Good.
I had a question for you.
Fire away. I'll dance around.
If you don't want to answer it, we can defer it. I don't mean to put you on the spot. Just that I know that the region has been undergoing this collective bargaining with the teachers' union, and it seems like it's been a fairly lengthy process, a lot of meetings. And I was just wondering if it was possible to say anything about it? Or
Well, I'm hoping we have our final meeting this Saturday. And it's been a long process, a collegial process, and I think we're getting to a good place for the community and the teachers, so all stakeholders involved. They still would have to go back and get what our group, which is 16 people in a room, represented by the teachers union as well as the school committees, and Carol Lisbon from Dover and myself from Sherborn, Board of Selectmen. And, so we all come to agreement on various topics. So that's the process, and we've been very careful. A lot of homework has been done by a lot of people to look at other towns, what they're doing, and so forth. So it's quite a process. I'm impressed with the work that's done to it.
But you're thinking it might come to fruition sometime in the next week or two?
Yeah, it still would have to go back. So I don't know about the process with the membership of the union, but at least our group, we're hoping we finish up Saturday. And then it's draft, clarifying the language in the contract and so forth. And I think, we'll be reasonably pleased with the outcome.
I'm asking, well, first I should commend you for all the work that you put in, but I'm asking only because of its potential impact on the numbers we've been looking
That's
at
right.
and the budgets we've been looking at.
That's right.
And that's, when you have a model with a fixed pie, if one piece gets bigger, the other pieces become more difficult, or if that piece gets smaller, then
Yeah.
it becomes easier. So
Yeah, I'm not really clear what, and I'm not familiar with the school budgets at this stage of the game, so I can't speak to that. And all we've seen so far is model number 1. And I remember last year, I think I have model 13 from last year. So, there's going to be certainly a process to get to the final numbers here. But advisory's doing a very detailed, thorough job on what they're looking at, that's for sure.
Thank you.
So I hope I didn't speak out of school or school contract, if you will. All right. We have a warrant here that it's warrant number 31. It's in the amount of $1,200,853.69.
So moved.
It needs town administrator review. Just some comments that come out of the review of it. I'd like us to get a better handle on what we're doing with snow and ice, just to understand it better. There's a bunch of outside guys, there's a bunch of payroll, and just a better sense of what's going on that I wasn't able to obtain at the, at the 11th hour looking at this thing. We also, I think that, I'm want to be sure we reflect the practice that we've been using when it comes to snow days in terms of how people record their time. So we need to, if it's not reflected in here, and I couldn't really tell because I didn't get a chance to look too closely, but if it's not, we need to correct that in the next payroll.
A couple of the payrolls were submitted in advance of the storm, so those, we'll be looking for those corrections.
Next go-round.
Yeah.
Okay. And again,
So does that mean they're not adjusted in this warrant,
Right.
David? Wouldn't we want to adjust them?
Some are adjusted.
But the ones that aren't,
correctly.
wouldn't we want to adjust them?
Well, I mean, we've done this in the past, I mean, as far as going back and making adjustments to
and it really is
payrolls.
adjustments to individuals' vacation or personal days, basically.
Right.
And/or sick, I don't know.
Right,
It's not really using
I mean,
sick.
we have a handle on which offices.
Okay.
So
we need to
that would
check.
be for salaried positions you're talking about,
Yeah.
or even for hourly positions?
And for hourly, too, I think, right?
Yes.
To the extent an hourly person did not come in, well, they wouldn't get, unless they're using time here, they wouldn't charge time if they were hourly, would they?
But there are some in there that have charged time, I think David's saying, because they were submitted before the storm.
Yeah, I think you'll see regular hours in one of the offices that I'm thinking
Okay.
of, that they reported as working regular hours.
I
but
see.
that
And
was
that's why I'm
submitted
wondering
before the
why we
storm.
would adjust that next time instead of taking care of it this time.
I don't know, I'd have to ask payroll, but they told me that's how they do it, is they wait for the hours to be adjusted next
So
time.
our approval would be contingent upon correcting in the next cycle
Right.
for what was done here, right?
I now recall I need to recuse myself from this because I had some reimbursement on there.
Okay.
So it's
So it's the two of us.
Yeah, and those are the issues I had too, I think,
So I
we just have to
would
be, we have to
move
be
that,
careful. I still continue to be amazed by the way this warrant is put together on the payroll side. It's remarkable to me, the number of pieces of paper and handwritten notations and adjustments and retroactive adjustments and future adjustments and
it's ripe for
look-backs,
mistake.
and it's unwieldy. There's got to be a better way to do this. I don't think any business would run a payroll like this. We've just got to get a better handle on this. We shouldn't have these discussions every single time. And the people who are handing in those pay sheets, they have to check their work, do their addition a couple of times, make sure everything's accurate, make sure page 1 agrees with page 2.
Right.
It's crazy that so many people have to look at this to get it to be right.
There was a recommendation from Department of Revenue to automate and to computerize and to do all these things.
It'd be, I mean, I have to look at it and bring back numbers on, it's probably 50 to 60,000, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, and I bet we'd save 2 positions total if we
Yeah.
did that because of all the time that gets
Right.
spent doing this.
There are also some other larger towns, there's a way of
Or you could
looking
use
at regional
ADP
options.
or some service too. I mean, there's lots of ways
Right.
to do this.
All right. But one other question I had, David, to look into is when we approve payments to vendors and so forth, when the check actually goes out.
Right.
Because it seems like, I think I've just come to learn there may be a bit of a delay. It doesn't happen for another week and a half or something, and,
Right.
to the extent something's got a timely nature.
Right. Once you sign them on Thursday night, I had assumed that because the offices are closed on Friday, that they would be back in on Monday and start stuffing envelopes and addressing and getting them out that week. So I need to verify.
Yeah, I
whether
think what
that's
I've
being
heard
done.
is they don't actually cut the checks until a week from Monday or something.
But I still
mean,
find that bizarre, so.
Yeah, so that seems to me we ought to be more timely,
Yeah.
so that we don't get our
But are
shorts
we
in a twist.
bi-weekly now?
Yes.
Yes, as of now.
That's
Yep.
huge. Well done, yeah.
Yeah.
It
Thank you for
cost
that.
us a
That's
bit,
a-
but,
Oh, you're welcome.
I've been sort of pounding on the table for that for 4 years.
all right, so I move we approve warrant
Okay, I just want
31.
to make, there was one
Oh,
more
please
comment on
do.
there,
I'm sorry.
something I mentioned to David too, which is, phone bills again. We've got, Board of Health phone bills, $90-something with long-distance charges for individual calls to places that are 10 miles away from here. I mean, I don't know who has a phone plan like that nowadays, but the Board of Health does. And we just have to get these phones on either a single bill or a plan that makes sense and save some money.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be looking at that. I talked to Deb in Accounts Payable about trying to start recording these so that we can get a better...
Yeah,
grip on it.
but this is kind of an ongoing thing, so we just have
That's
to move it
Yeah.
Just
forward.
gotta get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, I'll second your motion.
All right, well, my motion is contingent upon DA review and sign off, and that adjustment for the payroll for the snow day there. So, all in favor? Great. Thank you.
Paul abstained.
That's right, Paul is abstained. Good job.
Okay.
All right. So I don't see Barbara here, but...
Was she coming?
Was
Maybe she
coming?
might be
I
outside
thought-
talking to Diane. Diane's
Yeah,
talking to
okay.
somebody.
All right. Well, so we're going to go into executive session, so I'll make that motion unless there's anything further you gentlemen have for this meeting?
Yeah.
Barbara's here? Okay. So I move that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, and I so declare that having this discussion in open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's litigating position with respect to the following case. Cannon et al. Versus the Town of Sherborn Zoning Board of Appeals et al. Cannon et al. Versus the Town of Sherborn Planning Board et al. I need a second and a roll call vote.
Second.
The motion is seconded by Mr. Jimo. Having a second, I'll now call a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis?
Aye.
Mr. Jimo?
Aye.
Mr. Caruso, aye. Having passed by a vote of 3-0, the open session is now closed, not to return, and have a good night. Thank you very much.